The SOS in deep space. Jake Carter leaned back in the pilot's chair of his small cargo ship, the Stellar Runner, watching the endless expanse of stars through the cockpit window. It was supposed to be a simple run, transporting mining equipment to a distant colony. Boring, routine work, exactly the way Jake liked it. But the peace was shattered when his ship's console lit up with a blaring alert. Unidentified distress signal detected, the onboard AI announced in its calm, monotone voice. Jake frowned. Distress signal. From where? The AI displayed a faint signal on the navigation screen. It was weak, flickering in and out, but unmistakably real. Jake leaned closer, tapping the console to analyze the transmission. The signal was scrambled, and the language was unfamiliar, but the tone was clear. Whoever sent it was in trouble. Great, Jake muttered. Why can't space ever stay quiet? His first instinct was to ignore it. Distress signals out here were rare but not unheard of. Pirates sometimes used fake ones to lure in unsuspecting ships. Jake wasn't keen on walking into a trap, but something about this signal felt different. The desperation in it stirred something inside him. Against his better judgment, he decided to investigate. Plot a course to the signal's origin, Jake ordered. Warning. Approaching unknown signals may result in danger, the AI replied. Yeah, I'm aware, Jake said, buckling himself into the chair. Do it anyway. As the Stellar Runner shifted course, Jake prepared for whatever he might find. He double-checked his ship's systems, ensuring his limited shields and weapons were operational. He wasn't a fighter, just an engineer, but he wasn't defenseless either. The hum of the engines filled the cabin as the ship picked up speed. After an hour of tense flying, the source of the signal came into view. Jake's breath caught as he saw the massive alien vessel. It dwarfed his cargo ship, a gleaming, angular structure unlike anything he'd ever seen. But it was in bad shape. Large sections of the hull were scorched and torn open, exposing twisted metal and sparking wires. The ship drifted aimlessly, its engines dead. Jake slowed his approach, scanning for signs of life. Are you picking up anything? Life signs detected, the AI confirmed. Multiple entities aboard. Vital signs are weak. Jake hesitated. This wasn't just a wreck. It was a lifeboat for whoever was still alive inside. Leaving wasn't an option anymore. Prepare to dock, Jake said, his voice steady despite the nervous flutter in his chest. The docking process was nerve-wracking. The alien ship's systems were barely functioning, and Jake had to manually align his ship's airlock. With a hiss of decompression, the Stellar Runner latched onto the larger vessel. Jake grabbed his toolkit and helmet before stepping into the airlock. The doors slid open, revealing the interior of the alien ship. It was dark, the only light coming from the flickering sparks of damaged panels. The air was thick and metallic, though breathable. "Hello," Jake called out, his voice echoing in the eerie silence. "I'm here to help." No response, only the low hum of failing machinery. Jake's grip tightened on his toolkit as he ventured deeper into the ship. The corridors were strange, high ceilings, walls covered in intricate patterns that pulsed faintly with light. It felt alive, almost organic. As Jake turned a corner, he found them. A group of tall, insect-like beings huddled together near what looked like a central console. Their bodies were thin and shimmering, their movements sluggish. One of them, clearly the leader, turned its large, multifaceted eyes toward Jake. For a moment, neither moved. Then, the alien raised one of its delicate, claw-like hands, gesturing weakly toward the console. It didn't take a translator to understand. They needed help. Jake approached cautiously, keeping his hands visible. "All right, let's see what we've got here." The console was a mess of symbols and wires, unlike anything Jake had worked on before. But engineering was universal in some ways. Power sources, circuits, and relays. He knelt beside the console, pulling out his tools. "I don't know if you can understand me," Jake said as he worked, but I'll do my best." The aliens watched silently as Jake began repairing the console. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he patched wires and rerouted power. The ship groaned around him, its systems struggling to come back online. Finally, the console flickered to life. The alien leader emitted a low, vibrating sound that Jake interpreted as relief. The ship's lights brightened slightly, and the hum of machinery grew steadier. But Jake knew this was only a temporary fix. "I've stabilized it for now," Jake said, standing up. "But this ship's reactor is failing. If we don't repair it soon, this whole thing is going to blow." The alien leader stepped forward, holding a small device. It pressed a button, and a series of images and sounds projected into the air. Jake realized it was a crude translation system. "Help us," the leader said in a distorted alien voice. "Save the ship." Jake sighed, glancing back at the console. He hadn't signed up for this, but there was no turning back now. "All right," he said, rolling up his sleeves. "Let's get to work." The adventure had just begun. First contact. The alien vessel hummed faintly around Jake as he stood in its dimly lit corridor, tools clutched in his hands. The pulsating patterns on the walls seemed to move like they were alive, casting faint, shifting shadows. Jake's heart raced, not from fear, but from the sheer unknown. He'd dreamed of moments like this, but he never thought it would happen to him. First contact. "Okay, Jake," he muttered to himself. "No sudden moves. They're probably more scared of you than you are of them." Ahead, the group of insect-like aliens huddled together, their shimmering exoskeletons reflecting the flickering light. Their leader stepped forward slowly, its tall, slender frame moving with a strange, fluid grace. Its multifaceted eyes locked on Jake, studying him. It raised one clawed hand, pointing toward the failing reactor visible through a transparent panel in the corridor wall. The device in its other hand flickered to life, projecting a hologram into the air. Symbols, diagrams, and alien glyphs danced in front of Jake. He squinted, trying to make sense of it. Yeah, no clue what that says," he muttered. Then, as if responding to his confusion, the device emitted a series of clicks and whirs before spitting out a heavily distorted, synthesized voice. "Ship, dying," it said haltingly. "Power, broken. Reactor, failure." Jake blinked. That's one way to break the ice. The leader tilted its head, clearly waiting for a response. Jake hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Okay, I'll take a look. No promises, though." He approached the transparent panel, behind which the reactor was visible. It was a massive sphere encased in an intricate web of glowing conduits. The sphere pulsed erratically, the light inside dimming and flaring in unpredictable bursts. Jake pressed his hand to the glass, feeling the faint vibrations through the material. "I've seen a lot of machines," he said, almost to himself. "But this is something else." The alien leader gestured urgently, clicking rapidly. Jake turned back to the group. All right. Let me figure out what I'm working with." He knelt beside an exposed console near the reactor and opened his toolkit. The interface was alien. Symbols he didn't recognize, materials he couldn't identify. But the layout was familiar enough. Circuits were circuits, even in space. Jake worked quickly, tracing the power lines and identifying the damage. He muttered under his breath, narrating his thought process. "Okay. Reactors losing containment, powers bleeding into the core housing. If this thing blows, we're all toast." As he patched wires and reconnected circuits, the alien leader knelt beside him. Its large eyes blinked slowly, its movements calm but deliberate. It reached out a clawed hand, pointing to a specific node Jake hadn't noticed. "Oh, you want me to? Wait, you know what this does?" Jake asked, glancing at the alien. The leader clicked softly, a sound that almost resembled a hum. Jake nodded. "All right. Teamwork it is." With the alien's guidance, Jake rerouted the remaining power to stabilize the reactor. The conduits began glowing steadily, the wild pulses inside the sphere slowing to a rhythmic beat. The ship groaned, but the vibrations in the walls softened. "Reactor stabilized," Jake said, wiping sweat from his brow. "For now, at least." The alien leader straightened, clicking loudly. The sound echoed through the corridor, and the other aliens responded with a series of high-pitched trills. Relief, maybe. Gratitude. Jake couldn't tell, but the tension in the air seemed to lift slightly. Suddenly, the alien leader extended a clawed hand toward Jake. For a moment, Jake froze. Was this a gesture of thanks? A warning? He slowly reached out and grasped the claw. It was surprisingly warm, the texture rough but not unpleasant. The alien emitted a low, vibrating hum, a sound that resonated in Jake's chest. "Guess we're friends now," Jake said with a small smile. "You're welcome." Before he could relax, the ship shuddered violently, throwing him off balance. Lights flickered, and a loud, echoing groan reverberated through the halls. "What now?" Jake muttered, scrambling to his feet. The alien leader pointed toward a nearby viewport. Jake followed its gaze and felt his stomach drop. Through the thick glass, he saw a massive asteroid field surrounding the ship, the jagged rocks tumbling dangerously close. "Great," Jake said, exhaling sharply, as if this day couldn't get any worse. The alien leader activated the holographic device again, this time projecting a star map. It highlighted a glowing point in the distance, a safe zone, Jake assumed, but the path to it was treacherous. The asteroid field wasn't just dense, it was alive, the rocks caught in a chaotic gravitational dance. "You need me to get you through that?" Jake asked, gesturing toward the viewport. The leader tilted its head again, the universal sign of yes. Jake sighed, slinging his toolkit over his shoulder. "Of course you do. All right, let's see if I can keep us all alive." He turned back to the console, his mind racing. He was just a cargo engineer, not a pilot, not a hero. But as he looked at the aliens, weak, vulnerable, and utterly dependent on him, he realized there was no one else. He said into his communicator, "Prep the ship for emergency maneuvers, and maybe cross your circuits for luck." The alien leader placed its claw on Jake's shoulder, a gesture of trust. Jake nodded, feeling the weight of the moment. This wasn't just a rescue anymore. It was survival. A race against time. The air inside the alien vessel was stifling, thick with the scent of burnt metal and ozone. Jake Carter wiped a smear of grease from his cheek, glancing at the reactor through the transparent panel. The temporary fix was holding, but it wouldn't last. The faint vibrations beneath his boots were a constant reminder. The clock was ticking. "I've bought us some time," Jake muttered to himself, his voice echoing in the eerie silence. But not much. The alien leader, Siler, at least that's what Jake thought its name was, stood beside him. Its large, multifaceted eyes reflected the dim glow of the reactor. Jake could feel its anxiety, even though they couldn't share words. Then Sailor activated the holographic translator again. The distorted voice came through, halting but clear enough to send a shiver down Jake's spine. "Core, unstable, cannot escape, without repairs." Jake let out a frustrated breath, running a hand through his dark hair. He was good, but this was alien tech, a whole different ballgame. He had patched together power conduits and stabilized the ship's life support, but the core itself was beyond anything he'd seen. "How long do we have?" Jake asked, even though he already knew the answer. Sevlor pressed a button, projecting a countdown into the air. The numbers flickered ominously. 15 minutes. 15 minutes, Jake exclaimed. "That's barely enough time to think, let alone fix this thing." Sadler emitted a series of rapid clicks, its clawed hands gesturing toward another console down the corridor. Jake squinted, trying to understand. "Wait, is that the backup system?" Jake asked, more to himself than Sadler. If we can bypass the core and reroute the power. The alien leader tilted its head, a universal gesture of confirmation. Jake grabbed his toolkit and sprinted toward the indicated console, Sailor following close behind. The corridors seemed to grow darker as the ship continued its slow descent into failure. When they reached the console, Jake hesitated. It was a tangle of alien wires, pulsing circuits, and glowing panels, nothing like the standardized human systems he was used to. For a moment, doubt crept in. "All right, Jake," he muttered, shaking off the fear. "You've been in worse situations." "Probably." He opened the panel and began working, tracing the alien circuitry and improvising as he went. The ship groaned ominously, as if protesting his efforts. Sparks flew, making him flinch. Okay, Jake muttered. "Don't blow up on me yet." Sailor clicked anxiously beside him, its large frame looming over Jake's shoulder. It pointed to a glowing node deep within the console. "You're saying that's the bypass switch?" Jake asked, glancing up. Sailor clicked in response. "All right, let's hope this works." Jake reached in, carefully connecting the wires. The console flared with light, and the ship's hum grew steadier. Jake grinned. "Ha! Got it. Power rerouted." A deafening groan cut him off as the ship shuddered violently. Jake was thrown against the wall, his toolkit clattering to the floor. Sailor caught itself with its clawed limbs, letting out a sharp, guttural sound. Jake scrambled to his feet, his heart pounding. What now? A sharp alarm blared through the ship, the lights dimming to a faint red. Sailor pointed toward a nearby viewport, its clicks growing frantic. Jake followed its gaze and froze. The ship had drifted deeper into the asteroid field. Massive, jagged rocks tumbled through space, their surfaces glinting ominously. One particularly large asteroid was heading straight for them. "Oh, come on," Jake shouted, "as if I didn't have enough problems." Sailor grabbed Jake's arm and pulled him toward another console. It gestured urgently, indicating the navigation system. The translator flickered to life again. "Path. Clear. You must steer." Jake's jaw dropped. "Me? I'm not a pilot. I'm an engineer." Sailor clicked insistently, its claw tapping the console. Jake groaned, running a hand over his face. "Fine. But if we crash, it's on you." He slid into the pilot's seat, his hands hovering over the controls. The interface was completely alien, but the basics were intuitive enough. Jake gripped the controls and took a deep breath. "All right, let's do this." The ship lurched as Jake engaged the thrusters, maneuvering it away from the incoming asteroid. The vessel groaned in protest, its damaged systems struggling to respond. Sweat dripped down Jake's forehead as he navigated the chaotic asteroid field. Each movement was a gamble, every turn a potential disaster. "Hang on back there," Jake shouted, narrowly avoiding another massive rock. The ship scraped against a smaller asteroid, sending a jolt through the hull. Sailor let out a series of sharp clicks, its claws gripping a nearby rail. Jake didn't need a translator to understand. Focus. With one final burst of speed, the ship broke free of the asteroid field, the tumbling rocks fading into the distance. Jake slumped in the chair, his chest heaving. "Made it," he said, his voice shaky. "Barely." Sailor stepped forward, placing a clawed hand on Jake's shoulder. The alien emitted a low, resonant hum, a sound Jake hadn't heard before. Gratitude, maybe. Respect. Jake smiled faintly, but his relief was short-lived. A new alert blared from the console. Jake glanced at the screen, his stomach sinking. The reactor's containment field was failing again. This time, the countdown was even shorter. "Of course," Jake muttered, shaking his head. "It's never easy, is it?" Sailor gestured toward him, its multifaceted eyes gleaming with determination. Jake stood, picking up his toolkit. "All right, big guy," he said. "Let's save your ship." Again. The race wasn't over yet. It had only just begun. An unseen threat, Jake Carter barely had time to catch his breath after navigating the alien ship through the asteroid field when the alarm blared again. This one was different, sharp, insistent, and loaded with urgency. He glanced at the console, his stomach tightening as new symbols flashed across the screen. "What now?" Jake muttered, already dreading the answer. Salor, the insect-like alien leader, leaned over the console, its clawed hands flying across the controls. The holographic translator sputtered to life, its distorted voice breaking the tense silence. "Enemy vessel, approaching." Jake blinked. "Enemy, as in hostile." Salor turned to him, its multifaceted eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. It clicked rapidly, gesturing toward a nearby viewport. Jake followed its motion and felt his blood run cold. Through the viewport, a sleek, menacing ship loomed in the distance. Its black hull gleamed against the stars, and its angular design screamed aggression. Red lights dotted its surface, pulsing rhythmically as it closed the distance. "Oh, great," Jake said, throwing his hands up. As if asteroids and a dying reactor weren't enough. The alien translator chimed again. "They seek the core." Jake frowned, turning back to Xyler. "The core? You mean the reactor? Why?" Xyler clicked slowly, activating the hologram projector. An image of the ship's reactor appeared, surrounded by intricate symbols. The translator struggled to explain. "Core contains energy, terraforming power, or destruction." Jake's eyes widened. "Wait a minute. You're telling me that thing can reshape planets or blow them up?" Zedlor clicked affirmatively. Jake groaned, running a hand through his hair. "Fantastic. You're carrying a weapon. And now the bad guys want it. Why does this not surprise me?" The enemy ship fired a warning shot, a brilliant beam of light streaking past the alien vessel. The hull shuddered violently, throwing Jake off balance. Xyler caught him, its claws steadying him before it gestured urgently toward another console. "Defenses. Offline," the translator stammered. "You must activate." Jake's jaw dropped. "Defenses? What defenses? I'm not a weapons expert." Sadlor clicked insistently, pointing at the console. Jake sighed, gripping his toolkit. "Fine. But if we get blown to bits, don't blame me." He dove into the console's guts, his fingers flying as he traced wires and rerouted power. The ship groaned around him, the vibrations growing stronger with each passing second. Sparks flew as he connected a final circuit, and the console flared to life. "Got it," Jake shouted. "Weapons are online." But the moment of triumph was short-lived. The enemy ship fired again, this time hitting the alien vessel squarely. The impact sent Jake sprawling, his toolkit scattering across the floor. Red lights bathed the corridor as the ship's emergency systems engaged. Sadler clicked loudly, its tone urgent. It gestured toward the viewport, where the enemy ship was preparing for another attack. "All right," Jake muttered, staggering to his feet. "Time to get creative." He activated the weapons system, the alien interface lighting up with unfamiliar symbols. Jake's heart raced as he scanned the options. The alien ship's armaments were basic, mostly defensive. Nothing that could take out the enemy ship head-on. "Great. We're outgunned," Jake muttered, but not outsmarted. His eyes fell on a nearby storage panel. Inside, he found a small, spherical device glowing faintly. Tadler clicked rapidly, its tone warning. "Decoy. Unstable." Jake grinned. "Perfect. Let's give them something to chase." With Xaler's guidance, Jake rigged the decoy to emit a powerful energy signature mimicking the reactor. He activated it and launched it into space, watching as it streaked toward the asteroid field. The enemy ship hesitated, its scanners clearly picking up the decoy. For a moment, it shifted course, following the false signal. "It's working," Jake said, his voice laced with disbelief. "They're falling for it." But just as relief began to set in, the enemy ship stopped abruptly. It fired a smaller, faster projectile at the decoy, destroying it in a flash of light. Then, like a predator locking onto its prey, the enemy vessel turned back toward the alien ship. Jake cursed under his breath. Well, that didn't last long. Sadler clicked urgently, pointing to the navigation controls. The translator's voice crackled. We must flee. Jake nodded, sliding into the pilot's seat. Yeah, no kidding. As he engaged the engines, the alien ship lurched forward, its damaged systems protesting loudly. The enemy vessel gave chase, its weapons lighting up the dark expanse of space. Jake weaved through the remnants of the asteroid field, narrowly avoiding incoming fire. This is insane, Jake muttered, his hands gripping the controls tightly. Completely insane. Sadler placed a clawed hand on his shoulder, clicking softly. The sound was calming, almost reassuring. Jake glanced at the alien leader, then back at the viewport. All right, he said, determination hardening his voice. Let's show them what human ingenuity can do. With the enemy ship closing in, Jake pushed the engines to their limit, weaving through debris and using every trick he knew. The race for survival had truly begun. The ingenious defense. The ship rattled violently as another blast from the enemy vessel skimmed its shields. Jake Carter clung to the console, sweat dripping down his face. The alien ship groaned in protest, its damaged systems barely holding together. Lights flickered ominously, bathing the cramped cockpit in shades of red. This is ridiculous, Jake shouted, slamming his fist on the console. I'm a cargo hauler, not a soldier. Salor, the insect-like alien leader, stood beside him, its multifaceted eyes scanning the chaotic readouts on the holographic display. It clicked rapidly, gesturing toward a nearby compartment. The translator device sputtered to life, projecting its distorted voice. Defense systems, failing. We must fight back. Jake threw up his hands. Fight back with what? Bubble gum and duct tape. Sailor ignored him, opening the compartment to reveal a collection of alien devices. Jake stared at the strange gadgets, their surfaces glowing faintly with energy. What am I looking at? He asked, his frustration giving way to curiosity. The translator flickered again. Tools, improvisation. Jake blinked, then a slow grin spread across his face. Improvisation, ah. Now you're speaking my language. He grabbed a small glowing sphere, its surface humming faintly in his hand. Sadler clicked sharply, gesturing to the sphere and then to the viewport where the enemy ship loomed closer. You want me to weaponize this? Jake asked, holding up the sphere. What even is it? The translator struggled to explain. Energy pulse, destabilization. Jake frowned, his engineering brain kicking into gear. A destabilization device. Like an EMP. Oh, this could work. With no time to lose, Jake dove into his toolkit, combining wires, conduits, and scraps of alien tech. Sparks flew as he worked, his hands moving with frantic precision. Sadler watched silently, its presence steady despite the chaos around them. The ship shuddered again, and the cockpit filled with a harsh, grating sound. The enemy vessel had locked onto them, its massive cannons charging for a final blow. Whatever you're doing, human, the translator stammered. Do it. Fast. I'm doing it. Jake snapped, connecting the last wire. The device in his hands flared to life, glowing brighter than before. He glanced at Tyler. All right, big guy, where's your targeting system? Sailor gestured to another console. Jake slid over, the improvised weapon cradled in his arms. He connected the device to the targeting array, praying it would integrate without frying the whole system. Come on, he muttered, sweat dripping into his eyes. The console lit up, the targeting system locking onto the enemy ship. Jake grinned. Gotcha. He slammed his fist on the launch button. The device shot out of the alien vessel, streaking through the void like a comet. The enemy ship didn't react at first, its scanners likely dismissing the small, glowing object as debris. But when the sphere reached its proximity, it erupted in a brilliant pulse of energy. The effect was immediate. The enemy ship's lights flickered wildly, its engines sputtering. The massive cannons powering its weapons went dark, and the ship drifted slightly, its systems caught in the EMP-like wave. "Yes," Jake shouted, pumping his fist. "Take that, you oversized tin can." Fedor clicked in what Jake could only assume was agreement, its posture less tense now. But the moment of triumph was short-lived. The holographic display showed the enemy vessel slowly regaining power. Its backup systems were already kicking in. "Of course," Jake muttered. "Nothing's ever easy." Sailor gestured to the navigation controls, its tone urgent. "We must escape their systems. Recover soon." Jake nodded, sliding back into the pilot's seat. "Yeah, I got it. Let's get the hell out of here." The alien ship groaned as Jake pushed its engines to their limit, weaving through the remnants of the asteroid field. Behind them, the enemy vessel flickered back to life, its weapons charging once more. As Jake maneuvered the ship, his mind raced. The EMP device had bought them time, but it wasn't enough. He needed something bigger, something final. His eyes flicked to Texaler, who stood silently beside him. "You've got more tricks up your sleeve, right?" Jake asked. "Because I'm running out of ideas." Fowler clicked softly, its clawed hands gesturing toward the holographic display. The translator chimed in. "One option, dangerous." Jake sighed. "Dangerous? Of course it is. Let's hear it." The hologram shifted, displaying the alien reactor, the core of the ship's energy. Sadler pointed to it, its clicks slow and deliberate. Jake's eyes widened. "You're kidding. You want to weaponize the core?" Sadler's response was a single, resolute click. Jake let out a sharp laugh, shaking his head. "This just keeps getting better." With the enemy ship closing in and time running out, Jake realized he had no choice. If they couldn't run, they'd have to fight. And this time, it would take everything they had. "All right," Jake said, rolling up his sleeves. "Let's get to work. If this doesn't blow us all to pieces, maybe we'll live long enough to regret it." Sadler clicked softly, placing a clawed hand on Jake's shoulder. It wasn't just a gesture of trust. It was a silent promise. They would fight together, no matter the cost. The sacrifice. The alien ship trembled like a wounded animal as Jake Carter stared at the reactor's holographic projection. The sphere pulsed erratically, its light fading with each second. Beside him, Sadler stood motionless, its multifaceted eyes fixed on Jake. The translator's distorted voice echoed through the tense silence. "Only one way. Merge, human, machine." Jake blinked, the weight of the words sinking in. Merge. What does that even mean? Sadler gestured toward the reactor, its clawed hands moving deliberately. The hologram shifted, showing an image of the core interfacing with a glowing neural conduit. The translator flickered again. "Ship cannot stabilize. Reactor responds to thought. Only human can guide." Jake shook his head, pacing the cramped cockpit. "You're saying I have to link my brain to this ship, like some kind of living autopilot?" Sadler clicked softly, its tone somber. "Merge, permanent, no reversal." The words hit Jake like a punch to the gut. He glanced at the viewport, where the enemy ship loomed closer, its weapons powering up again. The time for decisions was slipping away. "This is insane," Jake muttered. "You're asking me to give up everything. My life, my mind. For what? A chance to save this ship." Sadler stepped closer, its claw resting lightly on Jake's shoulder. Its voice came through the translator, soft but resolute. "Not just ship. Our people. Our future." Jake froze. He thought about the desperate clicks of the alien crew, their frail bodies struggling to survive. He thought about the countless lives that would be lost if the reactor, and its immense power, fell into enemy hands. "You don't even know if this will work," Jake said, his voice wavering. Salor clicked once, the sound calm but filled with a quiet confidence. Jake looked into the alien's shimmering eyes and saw something unexpected. Trust. Jake let out a shaky breath, his resolve hardening. "All right," he said, stepping toward the reactor. "Let's do this." Sailor gestured to a nearby panel, activating the neural interface. A series of glowing wires extended from the console, their ends sparking faintly. Jake hesitated for a moment, staring at the tendrils that would soon connect him to an alien ship's heart. "Just another day in the life of Jake Carter," he muttered, gripping the wires. "Here goes nothing." As the first wire connected to the back of his neck, a sharp jolt of energy surged through him. Jake gasped, his vision blurring as the ship's systems flooded his mind. He felt everything. The groaning hull, the flickering lights, the struggling engines. The ship wasn't just a machine. It was alive. And now, so was he. The connection deepened, and Jake's senses expanded. He saw the enemy vessel in perfect clarity, its weapons charging for a final blow. He felt the reactor's unstable pulses, its energy barely contained. And he heard Salor's voice, not through the translator, but directly in his mind. "We are with you," Salor said, its tone steady. Jake gritted his teeth, focusing on the reactor. He guided its energy, stabilizing the wild surges and redirecting power to the ship's failing systems. The lights brightened, the engines roared, and the hull seemed to hum with newfound strength. "It's working," Jake said, his voice echoing in the strange, shared space of his mind. But the enemy ship wasn't waiting. A blinding beam of energy shot toward them, faster and more powerful than anything Jake had seen. Instinctively, he pulled the alien ship into a sharp dive, the blast narrowly missing them. "Not today," Jake muttered, his hands gripping the controls as if they were an extension of his own body. He felt the reactor's immense power, its potential both awe-inspiring and terrifying. With Sailor's guidance, Jake channeled that energy into the ship's weapons. The targeting systems aligned, locking onto the enemy vessel. "Let's see how you like this," Jake said, firing the reactor-powered blast. The beam of energy tore through the void, striking the enemy ship with devastating precision. The explosion lit up the stars, a brilliant cascade of fire and debris. Jake could feel the ship shuddering beneath him, its systems struggling to hold together. "It's over," Jake said, his voice heavy with exhaustion. Sailor's presence in his mind was quiet, but filled with gratitude. "You saved us." Jake smiled faintly, though his body ached from the strain of the neural connection. He could feel the ship settling, its systems stabilizing under his control. But deep down, he knew the merge was permanent. He was no longer just Jake Carter. He was part of something far greater. As the alien crew began to recover, Sailor stood beside him, its clawed hand resting gently on his shoulder. Jake looked out at the stars, a strange mix of loss and purpose settling over him. "Guess I'm one with the ship now," Jake said, his voice tinged with bittersweet acceptance. "Hope you aliens don't mind a human hanging around." Sailor clicked softly, a sound that Jake could now feel as much as hear. "You are one of us." For the first time, Jake didn't feel alone. He wasn't just a pilot or an engineer anymore. He was something new, something extraordinary. And though the journey had cost him everything, he knew it had been worth it. A life-changing gift. The alien vessel drifted silently in the void, its systems humming softly under Jake Carter's control. The reactor's pulse had steadied, a rhythmic beat Jake could now feel in sync with his own. He was no longer just a man in a cockpit. He was the ship, and the ship was him. Around him, the alien crew moved with renewed energy. Their once sluggish movements had become sharp and purposeful, their shimmering exoskeletons catching the soft glow of the repaired lights. Sailor approached, its multifaceted eyes locking onto Jake as he stood near the central console. You succeeded, Hexaler said through the translator, its voice no longer halting but smooth and clear. We are alive. Jake gave a tired smile, leaning against the console for support. Barely. That reactor of yours packs one hell of a punch. Hexaler clicked softly, a sound Jake had come to recognize as gratitude. Your sacrifice saved us. Saved future. Jake nodded, his mind heavy with the weight of what he'd given up. The neural merge had tethered him to the ship permanently. He could feel its systems as if they were an extension of his own body. Every thruster, every wire, every pulse of energy. It was all him now. Yeah, well, Jake said, his voice quieter. It's not exactly what I signed up for, but I guess I don't have a choice. Hexaler stepped closer, holding out a small crystalline object. It glowed faintly, its light shifting between soft blues and greens. Jake tilted his head, studying it. What's this? He asked. The translator flickered. A gift. Knowledge. For what you have become. Jake hesitated, then reached out to take the crystal. The moment his fingers touched it, a surge of information flooded his mind. Alien blueprints, advanced technologies, schematics for reactors, engines, and weapons, all of it flowed into his consciousness, expanding his understanding far beyond anything he thought possible. Whoa, Jake muttered, stumbling back as the crystal dissolved into light. He grasped the edge of the console, his eyes wide. That's a lot. Hexaler clicked again, its tone calm. You are one with us now. Your mind, linked to the great knowledge. Jake exhaled sharply, trying to process what had just happened. The merge had been overwhelming enough, but this new knowledge felt like unlocking a part of himself he never knew existed. He could see the possibilities, the ways he could use this information to create, to improve, to protect. I'm connected to everything, Jake said, his voice tinged with awe. Your ship, your technology, it's all in here. Hexaler nodded. You are Guardian now, a bridge between our worlds. Jake looked out at the stars, a strange mix of purpose and uncertainty settling over him. He'd left Earth as a simple cargo hauler, an engineer with no grand ambitions. Now he was something else entirely, a being tied to an alien vessel, armed with knowledge that could change the galaxy. The console beeped, drawing Jake's attention. A faint signal appeared on the holographic display, a small, flickering dot in the vast expanse of space. He frowned. What's that? He asked. Hexaler tilted its head. Another distress signal. Different origin. Jake sighed, running a hand through his hair. Of course, can't even catch a break. But as he stared at the signal, a small smile crept onto his face. He wasn't the same man who had answered the first distress call. He was stronger now, smarter, and far more capable. Whatever was out there, he knew he could handle it. Guess I'm not done saving the galaxy yet, Jake said, sliding into the pilot's seat. Hexaler clicked softly, a sound that Jake now understood as quiet approval. The alien leader stepped back, watching as Jake engaged the ship's thrusters. The vessel responded instantly, its systems alive under Jake's command. As the ship moved toward the signal, Jake felt a strange sense of peace. He had given up his old life, but in doing so, he had gained something far greater, a purpose, a connection, and a future filled with infinite possibilities. The stars stretched out before him, and Jake Carter, engineer, human, and now something more, smiled as he dove into the unknown.